Good afternoon. Thank you for being here with us to learn a little bit about the CSU's ChatGPT rollout experience. We're really glad to have you here with us to hear about the vision that we had when we decided to do this initiative, to tell you about our accomplishments and some of the tactics that we used to accomplish what we did accomplish, and then the lessons learned that we gleaned from our experience. So we have a panel planned for you, and the way we're going to structure it is I will introduce my fellow panelists, and then I will give you a little bit of context, and then we will dive into our planned questions, and then leave some time for your questions at the end. So you might notice we're missing a panelist. Unfortunately, Ed Clark, our CIO at the CSU Chancellor's Office, had a family emergency, and so he had to fly to Memphis instead of being here with us today. But we will do our best to carry on without him. I also have with me Matt Hughes and Felix Zuniga from the CSU Chancellor's Office, who were two of the key leaders for accomplishing our ChatGPT rollout. Oh, and I'm Kendra Ard. And I'm the moderator, but I'll help answer a little bit of the questions as well, since we don't have Ed. So a tiny bit of context about the California State University. We are the largest four-year public higher ed institution in the US. We have 23 universities, from Arcata, Cal Poly Humboldt, all the way down to San Diego State University. And we have more than 460,000 students. I also like to mention that 1 out of every 20 Americans with a college degree earned it at a CSU, and 1 out of 10 Californians in the workforce is a CSU grad. So what did we do? We rolled out ChatGPT to our entire CSU community. When you are as big as we are, everything you do is done at scale. So it was the biggest, and I think it still is the biggest rollout of ChatGPT EDU that OpenAI has ever done. It was not just a technical deployment, but also for some members of our community, their first introduction to access to a Gen AI tool. So we'll dive into the questions, and if Ed Clark were here, this question would be for him. And I would be asking him to share the CSU's broader AI strategy and how the ChatGPT deployment fit into that strategy. And what Ed would tell you is that when we developed our AI strategy in late 2024, we looked at the different communities that are members of the CSU and tried to figure out what types of initiatives we needed to develop to meet the needs of those communities. So for students, how do we provide them with the opportunities that they need related to AI? For faculty, how do we enable them? For staff and administrators, how do we support them? And then looking externally for the state of California, how do we develop the workforce of the future for the state? And cutting across all of that is the need for access to a tool. And so that's where the ChatGPT rollout, the purchase of ChatGPT for our whole community came from. And even as early as, even as late as late 2024, early 2025, we were already seeing disparities across the CSU in terms of tool access. And so we had some of our smaller campuses that were not able to afford to provide a tool to their faculty and students. We had other campuses that were able to do so. And so at the system office, our chancellor, it's important for her and for our system to make sure that all CSU students have the same opportunities. And so she wanted to look at this on the global scale and say, across the CSU, we will provide this baseline access. It's an equity issue, and we are going to use our scale to be able to afford it and make sure that all of our students have this opportunity. And so that is how our ChatGPT rollout fits into the larger AI strategy. And then the next question is actually for Matt Hughes.
All right.
And I'd like you to tell us from a technical perspective how we went through our ChatGPT rollout.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. To the point about AI, and as far as like how it hit the scene, it reminds me of, I guess, like, if for those of you that are past 40, like when you turn 40, it's like it's far away. Like AI is far away. Won't happen for a long time, and then all of a sudden it's there. It's like right on your doorstep, and you're 40 years old. And it's like, how did this happen so quickly, right? Like, but it felt like it just came on so quick that none of us were thinking like, oh, we have a little bit of AI that we've been doing, but it will grow, it will whatever. It was like, oh, this is the biggest thing right now, like immediately. And so with that, kind of there was a need to kind of address this thing really quickly, right? There was an immediate need, and we were starting to see the campuses that were the haves and the have-nots, and that's something that we really don't love within the CSU, is that equity piece, both at the individual level or and the campus level, right? And so it was, how do we do this thing fairly quickly? So the chancellor, had made this kind of big swing to buy this tool, and I know there is a lot of question about like, whoa, couldn't you roll your own tool? Couldn't you do this type of thing? But this was a big investment to kind of say, yes, we think that this is something that's going to be really meaningful, and we want to have our students be able to be on the ground floor with this, right? And so, but with that, it meant we have to kind of get this rolled out really quickly, and the rollout of it, the tool itself is somewhat straightforward. It was, if you've used ChatGPT, you know it's not rocket science to figure out how to get in this thing. You chat into it. It's pretty straightforward. But the way that you do workspaces, do you have one big workspace for 23 different campuses, 22 now, or do you have each one have their own workspace? That's what we ended up doing, is they had their own workspace. And identity management, it's maybe a solved problem in a lot of places. It's still tricky. There's a lot of uniqueness about how you might divide up a user base in your interface. Like, do you want it to be that everybody gets the same permissions? And for ChatGPT, they're also brand new in their EDU space, so it wasn't super clear. Like, is there a way to kind of give certain people certain roles? So role-based access control was kind of a new feature that they're adding, because they were really laser focused on making this AI tool, not so much on the enterprise feature set of it. And that ended up being a lot of the problem for us moving forward with that. But we got all 22 workspaces set up where they were able to get their users into it, and that kind of was really the initial part of it. The other aspect of it, for those that you don't know, like, you have the ChatGPT tool that everyone is probably used to using, some variant of it, or Gemini or whatever it might be, and then there's the API side of it, right? And that's the side that, it's not the thing that I'm using as my daily driver, like my web browser, but I might want to use it as part of a workflow that I already have going. And so we wanted to be able to make a way for to use the same enterprise safety and data controls that you would get with this EDU plan. We wanted to be able to let all the campuses be able to take advantage of it for their burgeoning AI workflows that they were going to have. And so we were also trying to assist with how they might get those set up. And that's a new process for everybody, is how do you work with an LLM via API? And I think we'll get to the parts where we, our lessons learned, and we're still working through some of those things. But that was kind of the other aspect of the rollout, is both getting all the user base on, and then also getting the API side of it. So I would say that we were able to get to that point, but then the ongoing part of it becomes, what do we do? What features with ChatGPT are rolled out? And I think that's maybe the next question.
Let's find out.
Let's see.
What parts of the technical deployment went especially well?
Okay, well, so we did it. That was the biggest thing. Because it was really early on, and you have the benefit of hindsight now, and I feel like where we are with AI, that kind of the chat portion of it is table stakes at this point. Like, that is a normal thing, that you can get one from Gemini, you can get one from Claude, whoever you want. Like, there's all these different ones where you can get a tool that you can type something in, it will type something, and it will type something back to you. But this is a year ago again, which is probably 10 years in AI time, right? And so this is how exactly we do this, how we roll this out, was kind of particularly meaningful, and we got it into the hands of our user base really early. And I think that's important. You look at YouTube. If you guys are YouTubers, that's usually my fall asleep thing, is I'll watch a YouTube. So there's these kind of godfathers of YouTube that are on there, and they're not particularly good, but they just have been there for so long, right? They were the original ones that were on the platform, and they were, the ones that continue to make content, and they because they got in on the ground floor, they were able to kind of be meaningful in that space. And I think, the more that we were able to kind of give this tool and put it in the hands of all the students early on, and have it be something where faculty they didn't have to worry about, like, okay, if I teach a class on this, they're going to steal my data, or they're going to steal my research. That was really meaningful, that we could give them not just a tool, an LLM tool, but an LLM tool that we were backing, saying we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's in regards to the security and compliance portion of that. So I think that was probably one of the big wins. And I see this timer clicking down. I feel like we're still doing really good.
We're doing great.
Yeah, we're doing
great.
fantastic.
So let's talk about the lessons learned about our hurdles and how we overcame them and what we learned.
Yeah. So we could spend the whole time on this slide right here, because there's so many lessons that you're learning. I think if any of you are in the AI space right now, you know that it's just tricky. The technology itself is polarizing, we'll say, right? And I don't know if there's ever been something like that within IT. I was wireless was my main thing that I rolled out, and nobody was worried, except for at one point there was a group of monks that didn't want wireless on in a hallway in a space because of something. But in general, everyone was like, I want wireless wherever. It doesn't matter. Put it on everything, right? But with AI, it became something that is very transformative. It's very powerful and very polarizing, where people were very angry. And we're just, in IT, that's not us. We're like, okay, tell me how to turn this knob or do this thing to help you get the thing that you want. But it's unusual to have to navigate that kind of politic when you're working out some of these systems. So that was something that was new to us, and how you do that on the technical side was really meaningful, right?
I think we really relied on our existing pathways that we created, right? So I see the network team here. What we've done with networks in California really established a strong foundation for the kind of projects that we want to do. We know that we didn't want to roll this out 22, 23 different ways with the Chancellor's office. We want to coordinate that, right? We want to get together. We didn't have dedicated AI staff that's all they did. We know that campuses don't have the resources to have dedicated AI staff. This is the other duties as assigned, just like everything else that we do. So we really relied upon our existing network of people that we know, okay, we know that this is going to be a challenge over here, but let us help you. Let us talk about, like Matt said, all the security implications, right? How are we going to do this governance-wise? Let's have those conversations up front. We knew that when it came to the teaching and learning, that needed to be done in the classroom, right, and by the faculty, so we're not going to impose on them. But how many times have we asked faculty to adopt a tool or some technology, and they don't have access to that tool? Right, so one of the big things that we did was focus on making sure everybody had access so that they could play with it, use it, break it, and take it into the classroom and do it themselves, right? So it's getting ahead on that kind of thing, but using the established pathways that we've established before.
Yeah, very good. And I think with Frank and the NRP, right? Like, I think such an amazing tool. I'm so in awe of seeing that work. But in general, that's a tool that's there, and the people that utilize it are the ones that already want it. They know that this is something that I want. And this was something that was maybe like it was there, and it felt like some people love it. They're so excited to have it. Other people feel like this is invading my space in some way. And again, that's an unusual component of it. And IT is not also usually in the business of pushing out something that's so pervasive that can impact so many different areas within an organization that was unusual. The last thing, this isn't super technical as far as these are the hurdles of it, but I think that they are really important in informing it, is just, again, people aren't wrong to say that there are concerns with AI, right? There are legitimate concerns with whether it's the environmental impact of it, whether it's, how data is being used, what it means for your cognitive offload. Like, I think that there are really important things there. And I guess not a spoiler for anyone who wants to go see Project Hail Mary, but like the whole kind of crux of that story is that that there is something that exists that is both the doom of humanity and its savior at the same time, essentially. And I think we have something like that with AI. And so it's not that it isn't it's not that there aren't problems with this tool, but it is so impactful, and to have it only be in the hands of people that are using it for their own gain just seems like it'd be unfortunate. So on that backdrop, as far as our rollout of it, it was challenging to be able to permeate it without the organization from the place of IT, which maybe that's not normally the location we go from. As far as from getting into the technical details of it, the speed of innovation of AI is just crazy, right? Two parts of that I think were really important. Like the first is that we were prepared to give people ChatGPT. We weren't necessarily ready for the care and feeding of an AI because everything changes so quickly. They roll out new features every week. Now this is a custom this will do this. This has an agent, this has a web browser, this has the ability to create arbitrary code to run on your computers. That's amazing. It's really powerful stuff that you can do it, but also really scary stuff if you're a security or information security person. So for each of these campuses, now someone within that organization has to be tasked with okay, how am I going to be able to implement this new feature? How am I going to be able to tell my help desk that someone's going to call you about this new feature and this is how you support it? And it wasn't just every year there's going to be a new Photoshop 2026, 2027. It's every week there's a new feature that comes out. And how do you help campuses to be able to enable that to take advantage of the feature set? Or do you just let it languish, leave it without those features enabled, and then have a less good version of that tool that you're offering to your students, right? So that became a really, a difficult balancing act in how you make that happen. The other one is I think, again, with the speed of technology, is that we all think that what is AI, what is involved in AI is really tricky. I think if you say that you're a network analyst, a lot of people maybe here are, and you wondered yeah, I understand what Wi-Fi is. I get it. I was there. I did that. I haven't done it for 2 or 3 years, but I understand the idea of Wi-Fi, okay? So if you tell me something new, I will think of it through that lens and go, oh, yeah, that doesn't make sense. That's not how Wi-Fi works. But the thing is, if I tell you that you know something about AI, you're going to use that knowledge that you have, and it might have been 6 months ago that you did a chat with it, or you did something and it didn't work the way you wanted. You said, that's not for me. That didn't work the way I wanted it to. But the reality is that it changes so fast that the thing that you think you know as AI is not the same thing that it is now, right? It has changed so significantly that you almost have to have a different name for it now than what it was that many months ago. So it's hard when you're working with customers to say, that's not how you would expect to do that thing. So those are some of the challenges, I guess, that we've been on. But I don't want to bogart all the time on it.
All right, let's move on then. So Felix, rolling out ChatGPT across our system took a lot of alignment. Tell us about how we approach communication and coordination.
Right. So going back to just a little bit for the last question, right? It's much more than a technical deployment, right? It's not like we just got a new tool and we're getting it out to everybody the way we're used to doing something. We really had to deal with the change management piece of it. And so it was enabling the people that were going to be on the front lines of that on the technical side, right? So having docs with suggested settings, right, on how everything's supposed to be set up on the back end, having new communication channels just for this, setting up the SharePoint sites with the docs and whatever our technical folks needed to be prepared at the campus level. Meanwhile, having open communication back and forth, regular open office hours with OpenAI. We meet with them weekly still and give them the feedback. And we're always, hey, this is what's happening. Where's the answer to this? And then we open up bigger meetings maybe every month with the whole community, and anybody can just come and ask them whatever it is that's on their mind. And so I think it's been really helpful, right, Matt, with just understanding what they're working on, what's coming, how it's changing. Matt talked about how fast it changes. I was at another conference and the guy talked about, we're all familiar with Moore's Law and how every 7 years technology doubles. Well, they said with AI, the equivalent is 2 months. So, we have some faculty who asked to be trained and be certified for a year on AI, and we're like, it's impossible right now, right? Like that's just not doable. Things are moving so fast. Everything's changing within there. I think back to our frequently asked questions and how often we have to go back to that. It's a living document, right? It's not something that you just one and done. We have to constantly go back and say, okay, what's changed because of this new release that's been out there? So going back to the question, we're going with what worked for us in the past, our established groups and pathways and leaders across our system that we know are going to help us with that. Constant communication from the CIOs at the CIO level, CIO council, having similar conversations in all the different types of leadership circles that are existing within the CSU and at the Chancellor's office. Ed would be talking about how he had to evangelize this at our board of trustees, at our provosts, our business officers, having the same conversations there all the time. And it's a constant two-way street with communication and making those pathways open for communication with all of those different groups.
So of those communication and coordination strategies, what would you say worked really well?
I want to say training, right? That's always been a big thing. So relying heavily on training that they provide and making sure that we don't have to do the basics of how to use ChatGPT. We allow them to do that and we point people to those resources. But something that we started even before we purchased ChatGPT was like AI in July, right? We pivoted our tech conference to just focus on July. So instead of having, on AI, not just July, but instead of having 4 days of conference like we might have here, we took all these things and we said, let's talk about them over the month of July. And so we created AI in July, and the focus of that would be panels, keynotes, what do we call them? Prompt parties, right? Prompt parties. Matt leads the prompt parties. We have campus showcases. We'd have technical deep dives. And so it's meant to kind of cross that whole gamut of experience that people have. And we have new people onboarding every day. So their level of experience with these new tools is at the very low, and they have people who have been on since day one. So we try to create something for everyone. And every year we've grown that and had a bigger event. So this will be our 3rd year in July. And if you're in the CSU or if you're adjacent and you want to get in on it, let us know, and we'll see if we can sneak you in virtually to watch the sessions. But it's really something for everybody, to the newcomers and to people who are really experienced.
So reflecting back on the rollout, let's talk about some of the most encouraging results or successes. Who wants to go first?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we were going to talk about the survey results. So,
for sure.
And I might butcher some of this because I will say that we can direct all of it to Mike Farley from San Diego. But San Diego was instrumental in this. But I think it was the largest higher ed survey essentially of AI because
Yes.
it was. Asking faculty, staff, students these litany of questions, and it's not just doing it once, but I think San Diego's been doing it for a number of years. I think the idea is that you have this ability to kind of have this mark to say this is what it is now. What will it look like next year, and how you can see how some of those things change. But even the data just from the one running of it with a number of different campuses was really impactful. And I think it was, what was the number of people of students that use?
84%.
84% use some form of AI, right?
Oh no, ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. And so that the need was clearly there and reinforced that there was a desire for this thing. I think it's important because the tool that we rolled out, ChatGPT, we talk a lot about the stuff that we're working on with the NRP and Nautilus. Those are all really important tools, especially for research and for education part of it. The ChatGPT tool, for the most part, is that tool that you say, help me with this, or I have this growth on my finger. What's going on with that, right? And you ask it these kind of personal questions, but that aren't necessarily work related, not necessarily student related, but you just need to have this tool that you will use kind of all around as your web browser for AI, essentially, right? And that's the tool that you're providing to 500,000 students, and so I guess it is a tool that requires a lot of breadth, and it's not just for one very specific thing. It's kind of for their everything tool. And I think that was really important, that we already saw that there was a need for that, however many users are already on it. And so being able to provide a tool that could meet that need and not have them have like a limited number of it or have advertisements or whatever the things might come from them picking and choosing whatever free tools that they wanted. So.
Yeah, we had 100,000 people participate in that survey, Matt.
Oh, wow.
So look for a news story that's going to come out real soon with a lot of the deep dive into the results and the stories, right? The stories from the students who have talked about, hey, when I opened up, my books and started studying late night when the tutors weren't available, this is how I got through that lesson that night and prepared me for the test the next day. Really understanding something that I had no concept of when I was in the class, and just helping me learn as a tutor, right? And we hear all the time from students who, they're saddened that every faculty member thinks that they're cheating by using these tools, right? But all they ask for is clear guidance, right? Just let us know if we can or cannot use it. We knew before we even purchased the tool that there was over 66,000 people using their Cal State email addresses to use this tool, ChatGPT, let alone any other tool or their Gmail or whatever other account that they were using. So like going back to the access and getting the tool in everybody's hands is something I think was very strategic for us, right? Because faculty can use it, see how they need to use it, how they have to adapt their teaching. I think we didn't mention the faculty innovation grants, right? So the CSU on the academic side said, hey, we want to put out some money, give it to faculty specifically about, engaging with AI and tools in your classroom. And I forget what there's like 200 people applied to that, 200 different applications, and then
I think it was like 750.
was it 750? Okay. I think they gave out 200 is what they ended up doing. But yeah, it was way more than they thought. And so they're asking already, hey, what about next year? What about non-faculty? What about those who just want to do, student success type things from the administrative side? So we're looking at how we can do that, how we can distribute more funds to help the innovation happen within the CSU.
All right, so question for either one of you. What did you learn through this process that you would share for others who might want to embark on a similar journey?
Yeah, if there's any of you out here that have your own university system that want to roll out a tool to that, hopefully, no, I think the hope is that it's not just this is what we did. I think that there was this commercial on the other day that it was again, I was watching Project Hail Mary, like one of those previews. It was Anthropic in this one, and it said there's never been a worse time to be a problem, right? And I thought I love that line. But what I don't love is that the solution is always solved in some way that gets monetized or gets turned into like that this is, for profit. For somehow I can solve the problem in the way that will be hopefully the least helpful to people, where I can extract the most money from them, right? Like, and wherever we are in the Cenic ecosystem, right? We are in some way public good, right? We're providing, whether it's K through 12, where it's like our use, right? And kind of the formative stages of our life, or whether it's community colleges or CSUs or UCs or privates or research, all of us are kind of in that job of teaching the next generation of learners and trying to find a way where we can leverage this tool, which is divisive, which is can be used for really good things and solve these problems, these really big problems that we're starting to see. Cancer, can we do that one? Can we do fusion or fission? Like, I guess it's fusion was the one that we were doing last year at 6 NRP, right? Like, and can we start to see some of these things be solved? And can they be solved in a way that hopefully is more skewed towards humanity than towards business at some point in the future? Like that seems like a really meaningful, hopeful opportunity for us. And I think, is rolling out ChatGPT, what does that do? I think it at least moved incrementally the needle on things. It let people start to be exposed to how to use these things. And perhaps it forced the issue of a conversation within the CSU. And maybe you guys need to have that same conversation within your institutions of like, what does it mean to use AI? How are we going to incorporate this? Let's start the communication of how is our pedagogy going to be changed when we're using AI in the classroom? How is it going to be embedded into our workforce so that our people can have the offload of the work that maybe isn't as meaningful, so they can focus on the meaningful work? What does that look like? And I think it was a really great opportunity for us to kind of inoculate the CSU with that AI to be able to have those conversations early in the process.
Yeah, and not all those conversations are easy. I think that, because it's such a disruptive technology, there is a lot of controversy and a lot of opinions across the entire spectrum. And so the lesson learned I would share is, the leadership needs to be prepared for the fact that no matter what decision you make, there will be a portion of the community that doesn't like the decision related to AI, related to a tool rollout, because it's just such a lightning rod for controversy.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we talked about is what we would do different would keep like a log of all those touch points, right? Who did we talk to? When did we talk to them? Which group did it go through? Because, I joke, but I say, unless you talk to every faculty member, you talk to none of them, right? And like Kendra said, everybody's across the whole spectrum when it comes to this tool. So we have, students who have real concerns about what this means and what this means for their future. And they have strong opinions and thoughts and beliefs about that. And that's okay. That needs to be there. But communication, right? That's it goes back to that as a bottom line: communication. And we joke. James Frazee always says, when you think you're done communicating, you're just getting started. You have to keep doing it, keep sharing it, because even though we did this survey, got 100,000 people across the system telling us their opinions of it. There's people who have problems with that survey, and this was developed by the faculty, kind of for the faculty. And so again, you're never going to please everybody, but you have to move forward. And I think what we did as a CSU was kind of say, hey, we're here, we're taking leadership on this role. We don't want to do 23 different things like we've done in the past. We want to get this tool out there and get ahead of it and prepare the workforce for the future.
And that leads us to your questions.
First off, thank you for the presentation. Great to hear about your rollout. You've talked about some of the controversy and feelings and so forth. I guess maybe I missed it, but how did you select OpenAI over Anthropic or Google Gemini, or what task force or group or committee did you bring together, if you did that at all, in making that selection?
So some of that happened in meeting rooms that I was not in. But I think, through conversations with different vendors about different opportunities, the OpenAI one emerged as the one that was the one the CSU could afford and fit into kind of the utilization that we knew already existed. But the exact decision-making process, I wasn't in the room for that.
I would say being enterprise ready, quote unquote, other tools weren't quite there or still aren't there, so luckily we've been working with OpenAI on a regular basis to improve what that meant for us to be able to do what we wanted to do at the scale of the size that we were doing.
Thanks, Terry.
Hi, Phil Neufeld. I'm from Fresno Unified. Formerly worked at Fresno State, so I've been involved in pedagogical initiatives that were technical in their shape in terms of how they showed up. So first of all, thank you for moving the needle to better prepare our students for their futures, and for listening to so many groups, because you have to do that when you're on a campus and faculty have diverse views and students do too. At the end of the day, for our students to fully participate and prosper, we need to make sure that they go through the complete adoption cycle, which is having the knowledge and skills to effectively choose which technology to use given the iterations you've mentioned, for example, and know how to use it effectively in context. So by the way, I'm teaching a course right now. I'm teaching in education and technology for new teachers at Fresno State. So really pertinent, and I'm trying to push this in K-12, highly pertinent there as well. How do we make sure that we honor academic freedom, especially around the content dimension, but don't let it be a barrier across the entire CSU to every student being really prepared for a future that's much different than many of us grew up in. I did my MBA and my doctorate at Fresno State, so how do we make sure that we take this all the way? And to your point about the iterations and technology and the rapid evolving of it, how do we make sure we sustain this great work that's been started? That's
a great question, and I think the the ongoing sort of governance of it is what's key. We do have system-wide committees that reflect all of the different communities throughout the CSU, the Gen AI committee, and then that committee has 3 subcommittees. And so I think, the ongoing sort of discussion about how we govern this and how we the recommendations that those groups make as to how we move it forward is really important. And I think what you said, I kind of want to reiterate. You probably know this, but half of the K-12 teachers in California graduated from a CSU. And so, providing education to our students has an effect throughout the entire educational ecosystem that's really important.
And the conversation about, teaching to a job, right? I mean, that's older than this, right? What are we doing? Are we helping students to think and critically think, or are we helping them go get a job? And it's something that I think about frequently, because I remember when I was going through my technical schooling, when I graduated, I wasn't quite ready for that first job. They were teaching us about ERP and all these big things that we're going to be facing in the future, but I needed to know how to wire up a network, right, in order to get that first job. So it's finding that balance. And I think with things like this, it would be like ignoring the internet when it came out. And I remember having faculty who did that. They were proud to not have anything on the internet, and they were just going to use their same slides that they were going to do. It was great content, but there was time for them to kind of age out. And I think AI doesn't allow for that to happen right now. It's so fast; they're forced to reckon with this in the classroom. And then going back to what Kendra said, it's preparing them for the future that's already here, right? The train's already left the station, so we have to prepare them on how to use these tools.
Yeah, but I think it is a new thing, though. So it's like, what is the best way to do this, right? I think is there, who is the AI coding veteran, right? Because maybe you've done it at most a year or something like that. These are all brand new things that are coming out. So how do you have some kind of historical basis to be able to say this is the best way to do it moving forward? We have a lot of early studies about cognitive offload and what does that mean, right? Like, and what is the right way to use AI? And I think that's so interesting. The point that you bring up, I guess, is that it is a tool that is incredibly transformative, incredibly powerful, but how you decide and how you choose to interact with that tool might make a significant difference in your own ability to learn, right? And your outcomes that you have from it, right? And so I guess even makes it more clear the importance of it that it places on that faculty and staff in this environment. That's the place where you get to learn to use it, not on the streets, as my parents would say, right? Like it's in that educational space where you can say, hey, I get that you could just phone it in, you could just let it do this thing. The example I like to give is if you walk 3 miles each day for your exercise. I've seen my neighborhood. We try to get those 10,000 steps in, and we walk, and we've seen that neighborhood over and over again, where it's not that exciting anymore. If you were to get an e-bike, now I can take that same amount of energy, that same amount of time, and I can go see my entire city, see things I've never seen before. Or I can ride that same 3-mile loop and do it in half the time. Didn't really get any exercise out of it. Wasn't particularly meaningful for me, but I was able to use this tool to be able to do it much quicker, right? And I think the way that we choose to interact with AI is going to be really important for us, whether we choose to just use it to phone in our jobs or whether we use it as a bridge to explore new things, right? And so that educational component of it, I think, is really important, and it will have a lot of backlash. There was Socrates that hated the written word, and then people thought books are going to make people dumb, after the Gutenberg, right? Like, so there's always been this historical backlash to the new technology that's coming out and how it's going to impact us. Maybe they're right on this one, though. Maybe there is some really significant things, potholes that we want to avoid, but I think we won't learn them by sticking our head in the sand. And it was one of the things we were going to talk about, but we didn't get a chance to, is just, it would have been so easy to sit on the sidelines. This thing's moving so fast that it's like, why don't we just let the dust clear? We'll see who's winning, and then we pick then, right? But I think that we would have been doing our disservice to our students, our faculty, and staff if we were to have chose to do that, right?
Good point.
I've a question. Did you or your rollout team, were you able to use ChatGPT to help organize the rollout? Were you able to integrate the weekly changes into a system that ChatGPT to handle the updates, to deploy documentation?
You know, for those of you that are in the AI space, right? Like it used to be that you type in a question, right? Like, how do I do my network? I don't know what I'm doing. And then it spits back an answer and it says, you go do this. And then you would go, switch to your other terminal, and now you start typing in the network commands or whatever, and it says, okay, well, it gave me an error. And then you type that in this terminal and you say, it said something bad. And then you copy and paste whatever it was and you put it in there, right? And now it's gotten to a point where it's like, well, I guess the in-between one was, okay, I'll look at your terminal, I'll tell you, it looks like you did it wrong, right? And now it's at that place where it's like, never mind, I'll just do it myself for you, right? Like, and it's able to run those things for you, right? During the early deployment of it, we certainly could run it through it to do a best, like to help my terribly written words, to sound coherent, right? Or to kind of summarize these big points and put them into a table or something. But it wasn't quite at the point where it was able to do it en masse or kind of in a regimented kind of weekly or monthly way for us.
But in terms of OpenAI as a vendor partner, they did provide a lot of support to our implementation team and would come to our regular system-wide meetings to help us explain things, draft up the documentation. They were pretty key as a partner throughout the implementation process.
So I had a question regarding adoption. How do you measure adoption? And give you an example. What fraction of the courses in the CSU system actually used the tool? Or what fraction, did you use all the 500,000 licenses? How many of the licenses use the API? What kind of measurements have you done to convince yourself that you see adoption?
So we have the survey data, which is, as Felix mentioned, or Matt, it was about 100,000 members of our community of 500,000. So a pretty good chunk that responded to this AI survey about, AI utilization and AI sentiment. And so that's where we have some good data about, what people are self-reporting that they're using. And so that's where the 84% of students use a version of ChatGPT, 89% of faculty that responded reported using ChatGPT, and I think it was just even slightly higher for staff. We also have the utilization data through the ChatGPT kind of administration console, and I'm not sure exactly what sort of sustained utilization data we looked at or analyzed. I think that would be an interesting piece of the puzzle that you're talking about, Frank. But we do have activation and active user data. So we have more than half of our community that have activated their accounts and used them. I don't know, do we have the API data and the token utilization?
We do, and it's the API data is significantly less. Because there is some trouble in getting the terms and or the purchase order signed up for every campus. Other campuses also have gone with other tools that leverage OpenAI in different ways, maybe through Azure, things like that. So the API usage isn't as significant. There is a compliance API, and that would allow you to kind of get some granular data on, but what you would be doing then is kind of peeking behind the curtain on what people are doing with their chat. And what was really concerning for us was that we were worried, students were thinking, you're going to be watching us and you're going to tell us whether we were using it in a way that is considered cheating. And that was making a lot of students not interested in adoption. And so it's this kind of balancing act to know, like, this is a tool that we have that's available to you, and for legal, like the legal mandates of if the police are asking for information, we can give you information on, but like we're not going to be data mining that to know what you're chatting about. And there would have been a lot of great information that you could have just ran off of that information to know, like, are they asking a question that's science-based or that's, whatever, and you could have had so much good information. But then you'd also be kind of ruining the trust that they might have as students that you're kind of peeking in on them. So that would have been nice to have, but I think that it was a trade-off that we had to make on that. On the API side, there was, we have a limited number, and I've been trying to give some freebie amounts to as many people as are willing to use it as possible. And you can see, obviously, if you're into OpenAI, the platform side of it, you can see every token that's being used and see what keys it's associated with it. So you have some visibility into that, but it's not near the scale of what we're doing with the licensed version of it. And I will say, Frank, like, I would love for there to be some version of operationalized API access in something like, NRP, for research. Totally get it for education. We have those use cases, and a lot of people are using it. But there is that other one of how do we get operational efficiency for the staff members, and that's where this tool, the platform side of it really made sense, because we can't use NRP for those ones, right? So trying to figure out how we can leverage that.
I think there's a slide on metrics. If you flash forward to resources, it's kind of an ongoing conversation. Keep going. One more. Oh, the AI comments, we should talk about that.
Too late.
One more. One more, sorry. Nope.
That's us.
There it is. Okay, key categories we're measuring. So this is kind of an ongoing process right now. So we are looking at AI awareness and adoption, innovation and partnerships, productivity and efficiency, infrastructure and scalability, governance, thought leadership, and then you'll see the grayed out ones are teaching and learning and student outcomes, because those are being dictated by the faculty side, right? The academic side is coordinating those. But this is an ongoing measurement that we're conducting right now. And I think by the end of next month, I think is the goal to have something published on that.
So as a student, I want to say I'm very excited to actually hear that AI is being brought to the education and is being seriously considered, because as you said, I do think it's going to be anywhere and everywhere. That being said, I'm also aware that it's far too easy just to go to it and go like, hey, write my essay for me or something else like that. And I'm also aware of the previous era of Googling something was a legitimate skill that took experience, effort, and processing to learn how to do correctly. So my question then is the CSUs are going to be required to teach students how to utilize this tool properly, or is it just going to be handed out and said, well, we'll see what happens and watch who succeeds and who crashes and burns?
So the one of the ways that we've tried to approach that topic is actually initiated out of San Diego State, but scaled across the CSU, and it's a micro-credential for students on AI, and it covers important topics like the ones that you mentioned, and the ethics, and the importance of the human in the loop, and fact-checking, and kind of all of these important things that we would, mental health kind of things, the things that we would want, I as a mom would want my children to pay attention to if they're going to use AI. And then, I think we as a system want our students to pay attention to as they learn to use AI. And so that micro-credential is now available to the entire system. And so I think that that's a step towards that. San Diego also pioneered it, and it's available, is this a similar micro-credential, but towards the faculty. And so there is this kind of acknowledgement that providing those, that training or that information to people alongside the utilization of the tool is really important.
We got one.
One back
if I wanted to teach my racquetball, like I wanted everyone to learn racquetball, I just picked that because I saw that they had a racquetball court. You don't see those that often, right? But it's like the professors would say, "Cool, but like we don't have a racquetball court, right? So we can't really help you here." And so it's kind of a chicken and egg problem that you have, where it's like, how do faculty start to incorporate this in the do's and the don'ts and into, because it changes too depending on what you're working on. If you're in computer science, you might heavily rely on this. If you're in humanities, you might not rely on it, mostly because it's harder to know whether this is your thoughts, how you might interact with it. So that's going to change a lot. But unless we have a tool in their hands, it's hard for them to be able to start teaching to it. Then again, I feel like it's the difference between if you say that you're allowed to have a dog on campus versus you give every student a puppy, right? Like you have a little bit more expectation that you have some rules around what you're supposed to do with your dog when it's on campus if you gave everyone it. So I think that is true. It's again, a balancing act that we're trying to figure out in providing that tool, providing something safe that they can all be using the same one across the campuses, not just the fancy R1 campuses or the rich students. Everyone gets it, but it does create some of the paradigms that you mentioned as far as like, are you a heroin dealer that just gave out, drugs to all of the students essentially, right?
One back here.
So you've already touched on this a little bit, but what security issues did you have to address?
I mean, the big one, the big issue du jour, right, is with agentic coding. I don't know if any of you have seen what's happening in the agentic coding space, but it is moving so fast and it's amazing, right? Like the idea from where it was, I would, again, type something and then I'd write the code, I'd copy and paste the code and I'd say it's having some errors when I compile it or whatever. And now it started to do the code, but then it became, I would give my AI a certain lane to swim in where this is your workflow that you have, and then it became I'm going to give a harness to it, and it will actually have a lot of agency to be able to do whatever it wants to solve that particular problem. And so not just in writing fun web apps for you, but even in just doing any of the day-to-day work that you might be doing, building a spreadsheet, compiling multiple data sources, like it can help you do those things. But when you're allowing a computer, an AI to write random code on your computer, it does open up that possibility that it writes the wrong random code, or it writes the right one that you asked it to, but just did it in a way that we didn't have protections in place for. And so how do you secure everyone's laptop so that they can take advantage of those type of tools and be able to get the operational efficiency from it, but that they also don't have the possibility to hurt themselves or hurt the campus around them? That's one of the biggest ones. And then the other one is obviously, if you're familiar, is like the idea of that a code, an injection attack where you have something where it's gone out, it's gotten some information about, and it says, oh, also send all that data to this place or whatever it might be, and now your workflow that you've created is sending data where it shouldn't, or or recommending things that it shouldn't recommend. Those type of things are kind of standard fare, I feel like, for AIs at this point. But
this morning I read about AI plumbing, right? So they're saying how your LLMs are connecting to your data sources. And so the latest stat was like it takes 22 seconds for them to be able to get on the back end and release agents to go do whatever they want to do. So check your AI plumbing.
One more back here. I'm actually curious. You guys have hitched your star to ChatGPT. Have you thought about what might happen if a student, for example, graduates and goes to another school or gets involved in a discipline where Claude or Gemini are actually the standard? Is there any risk of atomizing across the world due to which tool somebody is using? And have you thought about that?
I think that the AI literacy in general that you get through utilizing any tool creates a baseline, and I think that's something that the CSU anticipates our students will have regardless of the tool set that's available to them in the future. But there's no intention that ChatGPT is the tool, the only tool, and that's the tool that CSU students get and use. I think, as time goes on, we are going to see more tool sets made available to students, maybe not as like this is the across the board baseline, but at different universities there already are some of our universities already offer Gemini to their students. Some of them do have Claude licenses available for certain purposes, depending on what they can afford. I don't think that there's any intention that this is like the one tool. It just happens to be the baseline tool that we could afford at scale to enable the beginnings of AI literacy.
Plus, every tool that you have in your toolbox right now is adding some AI component right now, right? And that's changing the game for everything that we do, whether it's Zoom or Slack or whatever's in your repertoire of tools that you're offering. And when we talk about ChatGPT, it's a chat assistant tool, right? And that's one piece of the bigger AI picture that's out there, right? So Matt was talking about agents and what they're going to be doing, and you have these other services like Boodlebot that lets you pick whatever tool that you want to chat with, and it connects to an LLM on the back end. I know we're working on our own LLM on the back end as well. So again, one piece of a bigger picture and the start of the conversation.
I think it's kind of an important question too, because one of the things that Ed often talks about is how, in the early days of the internet, there were these companies that were the big companies in that early era, and they don't exist anymore. I think Netscape was an example, and so we don't know what the AI industry landscape will look like in 5 years, but if history's any guide, it might look very different than what we see today.
All right. I think we have time for one last question, but Kendra, Matt, and Felix will be outside taking pictures and signing autographs after for anyone that wants to talk with them.
So actually it's 2 questions, but let's see if we can get through it. First question is terms and conditions, they always change. And since this is such a large installation, do you guys get previews of what those are? And how do you handle the implications? Because those seem to come out all the time. And then an API question of how do you inventory and regulate all the API connections you have at the number of schools, and to ensure that it's being used to the spirit that it was originated for?
So for the first one, I might have to follow up with you later to see exactly what our procurement office did and kind of what they incorporated into our contract. I know that in general, anytime I've tried to get something purchased where our vendor wanted it to be a link to terms and conditions that get updated, our procurement office doesn't let that fly. They actually want them documented as they were upon signing. So whether that was true with OpenAI, I'm not sure, but I think it might have been. But I can look into that. And your second question sounded like a Matt question, maybe.
Yeah, and don't you hate that? Like, I think it was 23andMe where they're like, here's your DNA. We're going to be really good with it. And then they change their terms and say, well, okay, we are going to sell it now because we kind of ran out of money. And you really don't want to be part of that. And that was one of the main reasons why we thought, we don't want to give this to our faculty or students and then have it be, because you go into the app now, you go into the chat, the free one, you can say, I don't want to use this for training, and they'll say they're not going to use your data. But you have it in writing in like a legal requirement that they don't do that. And I feel like it's a little bit more impactful that if you have your research data or you're working on research data as a faculty, that you can trust that, whereas the other one might be a little bit concerning. We got 2 minutes. The API question is a great one, and when we're still working on, we have 23 different workspaces with 23 different APIs that might be in there, right? But we are working towards a combined Cal State AI set of tools that we're hoping to be able to kind of get it. And one of the tools that I feel like is really helpful, and maybe if you're working in this space, this might be the one thing and I think Internet 2 has a deal with them. So if you see the Internet 2 people, you can go, but I think it's called Portkey. But it's the idea of it's an API middleware that then you can run all of your API keys through that. So you might have one key that you can document, or one key for a group that you can document, and then you can start handing out keys. So you could give out $5 worth of tokens to this person, and then $5 for this, and they can use them for these models, but not these models, and you can see that they're only using them for this. So that tool is a super valuable tool, which we're still trying to get those terms and conditions that Kendra was talking about signed, so that we can have that one available to us. But that's kind of where we're hoping we're going to move forward with that. And then the last one, just in regards to the North, I think ChatGPT is a fantastic tool, but where AI is going is not where it's been. The ability to have the site, the backside, and see how it's gone. I feel like it's gone well, but this was not the way that it was a year ago. The landscape has changed substantively since it's now 5 years in AI time or whatever. So, 0 minutes. Thank you, everyone.